Where are my book people? Where are my book fans? Where are they? All right. How about that library in Alexandria fire, huh? There's an electrifying way to start a story. For those of you who don't know, the Library of Alexandria was in ancient Egypt. It was a repository of supposedly all the scrolls ever written and the collective wisdom of humankind up until that point. And that point was 48 BC when Caesar accidentally burned it down while he was invading, plunging us back into darkness again. And there's an internet meme that said, you know you're a book person when you're still upset about the fire at the Library of Alexandria, and it became a T-shirt. I was upset by it, but I grew out of it. But I understand it now. I was a sound recordist for documentaries and news and commercials for many, many years, and got to see a lot of interesting things and meet a lot of interesting people. But very often, the thing we were doing the story about was less interesting to me than somebody or something we met along the way. And I'll give you an example. I was working for HBO Real Sports, and they were doing a profile of this company in Philadelphia called Mitchell and Ness. They were a sporting goods store that was founded in 1904. They made uniforms for professional sports organizations. And by the 1980s, things were getting tough for them because a lot of stuff was made overseas and they were near bankruptcy, till somebody at the organization had the idea to create what they call throwback jerseys. So you could buy an identical version of the jersey that your favorite legendary sports figure wore. And these became incredibly popular. Rappers and celebrities started wearing them, and they were selling for hundreds of dollars a piece, and the resale market was tens of thousands of dollars a piece on some of them. And they were back, and we were there to do a story about their literal rags to riches tale. But while we were there, I had some equipment cases that we needed to get out of a shot, and I asked if there was someplace I could store them, and they said, well, we own the building. There's an empty storefront next door that's been empty for years. Why don't you throw them over there? And they gave me the key. And I went in, opened up, turned on the light, and oh my God. In this filthy old storefront, piled from floor to ceiling, and for almost a block, were magazines and newspapers and comic books. And I started poking around, and it was like there were newspapers that no longer existed, like the Philadelphia Bulletin. There were magazines going back to the 40s. There was an entire wall of popular mechanics going back to the 30s. Comic books from the Silver and Golden Age. I felt like I had walked into that warehouse at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, or like the treasure cave in Aladdin. Books and magazines and comic books, and it just piled high. And I went next door and said, what's the deal with the place next door? And they said, well, this used to be the headquarters of the company that ran newsstands all over Philadelphia. And newsstands just went the way of the dodo, and they just closed up one day and left all this stuff there. And they believe that it was one copy of everything they ever sold going back to 1920. I was gobsmacked. I'm a big history fan, but I'm not a fan of like presidents and battles and things like that. I'm a big fan of human history, of how people lived during any given period, what they ate, what they thought was important, what they talked about, what they wore. And this was a catalog, a complete catalog of the human history of the United States in the 20th century. And it was The newspapers were the first draft of history before historians could get it to it and tell us what was important and what wasn't, and generations could come along and rewrite history. This was this was history as people lived it. This was a snapshot of life in America for a century. And I was still working on this other job next door, but I couldn't stop thinking about this. What could be done with all of this material? You know, maybe a university would be interested in it and collecting it and cataloging it, but they probably want a grant or something like that. And I started thinking about how I could, you know what? If I sold off all the comic books, I could pay myself to catalog everything and rewrite a new history, the people's history of the United States. And I got really excited about this idea. And I went to the manager of the store. I said, you know, is there any way I could come back and just kind of poke through the stuff and see what's there? He said, yeah, come back anytime. We have no plans for it. Well, a week became a month, became a couple of months, and I didn't get back there for like a year. And I went and I said, hey, remember me? I was wondering if I could poke around next door. And they said, oh, you're too late. The fire marshal was here. Apparently, he was also concerned about another great fire. And so the entire history of the United States in the 20th century was carted away to the incinerator at 7 cents a pound. Thanks.